Settle in, take a deep breath, and welcome to Science After Dark. It is late, the day is winding down, and this is our time to just sort of explore the universe together.
Yeah, the perfect time for a deep dive.
Exactly. And tonight, we are looking inward. I mean, very inward.
So inward that it might actually change how you see yourself in the mirror tomorrow morning.
Right, because, you look in the mirror and you see one single unified human being. But biologically speaking, you are actually a walking, breathing ecosystem.
You really are. It forces this this profound shift in perspective. You feel like an individual, but the biological reality is that you are a vast, thriving metropolis of invisible life.
A metropolis. I love that. And we're going to explore this staggering realization today, that you are not a solitary organism at all.
Not even close. I mean, the sheer scale of this inner universe is difficult to even visualize. To put it in purely physical terms, the microorganisms living in and on your body right now, they weigh roughly 2 to 3 pounds.
Which is, wow, that's roughly the weight of the human brain.
Yeah.
So you are basically walking around carrying an entire extra organ's worth of microscopic life.
That's a great way to think about it. An invisible organ.
But, for the longest time, there was this legendary statistic floating around about the actual ratio of those microbes to our own human cells.
Oh, the 10-to-1 myth.
Yes.
Yes.
I remember hearing that everywhere. We were outnumbered 10-to-1 by bacteria.
Right. And for decades, that 10-to-1 margin was just popular dogma. I mean, it was repeated in textbooks and science articles pretty much everywhere you looked.
But it wasn't exactly accurate, was it?
No, not really. That figure actually traced back to a rather rough back-of-the-envelope estimate made back in 1972.
By a microbiologist named Thomas Lucky.
Right. Exactly. It wasn't until 2016 that researchers at the Weizmann Institute of Science finally sat down and did a rigorous mathematical recalculation of the whole thing.
And they found out we aren't quite 10-to-1. But, I mean, the reality is no less mind-bending when you hear the actual numbers.
No, it's still incredible. The 2016 estimate puts the average human body at about 30 trillion human cells.
Okay, 30 trillion.
Yeah, and roughly 39 trillion bacterial cells.
So it's a ratio of about 1.3-to-1.
Right. So by pure cell count, you are still slightly more microbial than you are human.
It is essentially a one-to-one partnership, you and your microbes just riding it out together.
But, and this is where it gets really wild, if we stop counting individual cells and start counting genes, the picture changes entirely.
Oh, right, the genetics.
Yeah. The human genome, which is the literal instruction manual to build you, contains about 20,000 to maybe 23,000 protein coding genes.
Okay, so about 20,000 human instructions.
Right. But the collective genome of your microbiome, that contains anywhere from 3 million to perhaps 22 million unique genes.
Just let that sink in for a second. Genetically speaking, you are more than 99% microbial.
It's humbling, isn't it?
It really is. It makes you realize we are less like individual humans and more like, I don't know, highly advanced microbial spaceships.
A spaceship. I like that analogy.
Yeah, we are just the vessel providing this warm, nutrient-rich environment, and they are the crew running the environmental controls.
They absolutely are. And our mission in this deep dive is to explore how this invisible crew controls almost everything about you. I mean, your weight, your immune system, and even your deepest moods.
Which is just fascinating. But before we get into how they run those controls, I mean, we really have to ask how we miss them for so long.
Yeah, humanity had a massive historical blind spot here.
Right. We have to go back to the moment these invisible passengers were first spotted. And look at how they were almost immediately cast as our mortal enemies.
Which is a tragedy in a way.
It is. So imagine the city of Delft in the Netherlands. It's the year 1683. We meet Antony van Leeuwenhoek.
And the incredible thing about him is he was not a trained scientist working in some pristine royal laboratory.
Not at all. He was a draper. He worked with fabrics.
Right, but he was obsessive. He taught himself to grind these tiny, perfect glass lenses.
Yeah, he was building these single-lens microscopes that could magnify objects about 270 times, which for the 1600s was just unheard of. They were more powerful than anything else in the world.
Driven purely by curiosity, he looked at pond water, he looked at blood.
And eventually he scraped some plaque off his own teeth and put it under the lens.
And through that tiny piece of glass, he became the first human being to witness the microbiome. He called them Animalcules, piney animals.
Yeah, and he wrote this letter to the Royal Society of London with this incredibly poetic observation. He said, There are more animals living in the scum on the teeth in a man's mouth than there are men in a whole kingdom.
He saw the density of this unseen world immediately. It wasn't just a few bugs, it was an entire kingdom.
But finding them is one thing, right? If he saw them in 1683, why did we spend the next 300 years basically trying to eradicate them?
Because honestly, that sense of wonder was eclipsed by basic human survival. As we moved into the 19th century, the germ theory of disease took hold.
And rightly so. I mean, it saved countless lives.
Absolutely. You had Louis Pasteur demolishing the idea of spontaneous generation in 1861 with his swan neck flask experiments.
Right, which gave us vaccines for anthrax and rabies.
And then Robert Koch won the Nobel Prize in 1905 for identifying the specific bacteria that caused tuberculosis and cholera.
Germ theory was an absolute triumph of human ingenuity. But it created a powerful psychological paradigm, didn't it?
It did. Microbes were invaders. Full stop. They caused disease, and the whole goal of modern medicine was to kill them.
The idea that bacteria could actually be essential to our survival was totally counterintuitive to the scientific establishment at the time.
Totally backwards to them. But amidst this all-out war on microbes, there was one notable voice of dissent.
Elie Metchnikoff.
Yes, Elie Metchnikoff. He was this brilliant Russian-born zoologist working at the Pasteur Institute in Paris, and he actually won the 1908 Nobel Prize for discovering how our immune cells engulf and destroy invaders.
Right, so he was highly respected.
Oh, very much so. But in 1907, he published a book called The Prolongation of Life, where he made a really radical proposal.
He had been studying peasants in Bulgaria,
Right.
people who lived to remarkably old ages.
Exactly. And he noticed they consumed large quantities of sour milk.
Which seems like such a weird detail to focus on.
It does. But Metchnikoff hypothesized that the lactic acid bacteria in this fermented milk, the Bulgarian bacillus he called it, could actually suppress harmful putrefying bacteria in the gut.
Which he thought would extend human life.
Right. He started drinking sour milk every single day and urged the rest of the world to do the exact same thing. Today, we recognize him as the intellectual father of probiotics.
But wait, if a Nobel laureate working at the prestigious Pasteur Institute figured out the core concept of probiotics in 1907, why wasn't this mainstream medicine in 1910?
That is the big question.
Right, like why did we treat this like a fringe yogurt fad for a century before actually studying it scientifically?
Well, it came down to a massive technological roadblock. For a very long time, the only way microbiologists knew how to study bacteria was by growing them in a petri dish.
Culturing them in a lab.
Yeah. But the vast majority of the bacteria living in your gastrointestinal tract are anaerobic.
Meaning they live in an environment completely devoid of oxygen.
Exactly. Deep inside your gut, there's no air. So when you take them out of the gut and expose them to the air in a standard laboratory culture, they just die.
So if you can't grow them, you can't see them.
Right. They were essentially biological dark matter. We knew they had to be down there, but we had absolutely zero tools to measure them or figure out what they were actually doing.
Biological dark matter. That is such a fascinating way to put it. We were completely blind.
We were, but the breakthrough finally arrived in the early 2000s, and it was driven by the genetic revolution.
The DNA sequencing.
Exactly. As the cost of DNA sequencing plummeted, scientists realized they didn't need to grow the bacteria anymore.
Oh, because they could just read the DNA directly?
Right. They could just take a sample from the gut, sequence all the DNA within it, and identify the microbes purely by their genetic barcodes.
And that technological leap just opened the floodgates. We could finally see the blueprints of our crew.
Which brings us to a landmark set of experiments in the mid-2000s by Jeffrey Gordon at Washington University in St. Louis.
Gordon's work fundamentally changed our understanding of metabolism, didn't it?
It really did. His team used what are called germ-free mice.
Germ-free.
Yeah, these are mice born via C-section in completely sterile bubbles. They are raised without ever being exposed to a single microbe. They have zero bacteria in or on their bodies.
So give scientists a perfect blank slate to test on. There's no background noise.
Exactly. So Gordon's team took gut microbes from mice that were obese and transplanted those microbes into the guts of the lean, germ-free mice.
And the results were just astounding.
They were. Even though the lean mice continued eating the exact same diet as before, they began to gain fat.
Wow. So the microbiome is not just a passive passenger tagging along while your body digests lunch.
No, it is actively driving your metabolism.
The microbes were literally changing how the mice harvested energy from their food.
Yeah, they were extracting more calories from the exact same amount of food.
But how are they doing that? What is the mechanism there?
Well, they do the heavy lifting that human biology simply can't do. You see, your microbes ferment complex carbohydrates.
Like dietary fibers.
Right. Dietary fibers that your human enzymes are completely incapable of breaking down. When the microbes ferment those fibers, they produce byproducts called short-chain fatty acids.
Like butyrate, right.
Yes, butyrate is incredible. It is the primary energy source for the cells lining your colon, and it actively reduces inflammation in the gut.
So it's like an internal refinery working the night shift while you sleep.
It really is. And they aren't just extracting energy, they are synthesizing essential compounds from scratch.
They're essentially manufacturing vitamins that your body cannot make on its own.
Exactly. Things like vitamin K, which you desperately need for your blood to clot properly, and crucial B vitamins like biotin, folate, and B12.
So as we began to map this internal pharmacy, the sheer scale of the diversity must have been overwhelming.
It was a massive revelation. In 2007, the National Institutes of Health launched the Human Microbiome Project.
That was a huge undertaking, right?
Oh, massive. It eventually cost over $170 million, aimed at mapping what a healthy human microbiome actually looks like. They tracked 242 healthy volunteers across 5 body sites, and Europe ran a parallel project called Meta-HIT.
And what they found was that your gut alone can host up to 1,000 different bacterial species.
1,000. And you personally might harbor a few hundred of them at any given time.
And the specific combination you carry is as unique to you as your fingerprint.
Completely unique. It's shaped by your genetics, whether you were born vaginally or via C-section, the food you eat, and the environment you live in.
But, the biggest surprise from this era of genetic mapping wasn't just finding out what the microbes were doing to our food.
No, the real shock was discovering who they were talking to.
The gut-brain axis, the physical hotline to the mind.
Yeah. For centuries, medicine viewed the body's systems in total isolation.
Right. The brain handles thought and emotion, and the gut handles digestion. Completely separate departments.
Exactly. But we now know there is a bidirectional communication network linking your gastrointestinal tract directly to your central nervous system.
Bidirectional, meaning the brain talks to the gut, but the gut also talks back to the brain.
Yes. And the main physical cable for this network is the vagus nerve.
It is this massive wandering nerve that runs straight down and from your brainstem all the way down into your gut.
And it is constantly carrying signals back and forth. But at the gut end of that vagus nerve, there's something called the enteric nervous system.
The enteric nervous system.
Right. This is a complex mesh of neurons embedded directly into the walls of your gastrointestinal tract. You have roughly 100 million to perhaps 500 million neurons down there.
Which is just wild to think about. That is more neurons than you have in your entire spinal cord.
Exactly. Which is why the gut is often called the second brain. It can operate totally independently, managing the complex rhythms of digestion without ever needing instructions from your head.
But here is the statistic that completely reframes mental health for me. 90 to 95% of the body's serotonin is produced in the gut, not the brain.
Yeah, that fact always stops people in their tracks. Serotonin is the critical neurotransmitter that regulates our mood, our feelings of well-being, and happiness.
And knowing that the vast majority of it is manufactured in the dense microbial ecosystem of your gut completely shifts how we view psychological health.
It changes everything.
But wait, I have to ask. If 95% of my serotonin is down in my gut, how does it actually affect my mood up in my head? It's not like stomach acid is seeping into my brain.
Yeah.
I mean, the blood-brain barrier stops things like that, doesn't it?
It does. It absolutely does. The serotonin produced in your gut doesn't physically travel through your blood into your brain.
Okay.
Instead, those gut microbes and the serotonin they produce stimulate the enteric nervous system, that mesh of neurons in your gut ball we just talked about. Those neurons then send electrical impulses up the vagus nerve. Think of the vagus nerve like a high-speed fiber optic cable. The microbes tap out a chemical message in the gut, and the vagus nerve transmits it as an electrical signal straight into the deep emotional and stress centers of your brain.
Ah, okay. So they aren't mailing a physical package of serotonin. They are sending a text message straight to the brain.
That's a perfect way to describe it, a chemical text message converted to an electrical signal.
So think about the last time you were incredibly nervous before a big presentation and you felt those physical butterflies in your stomach, or when you had a deep, undeniable gut feeling about a decision.
Right.
That isn't just a colorful metaphor, is it? That is your microbes
Yeah.
interacting with your enteric nervous system, literally talking to your brain.
It's physical reality. And the evidence for this is incredibly compelling. If we look back at those germ-free mice, the ones raised in the sterile bubbles with no microbiome, they show highly altered anxiety-like behaviors.
And abnormal responses to stress hormones, too.
Yeah. Their neurological development, including neurogenesis, which is the growth of new brain cells, is fundamentally shifted by the absence of bacteria.
But the really crazy part is, when researchers take those germ-free, highly anxious mice and introduce normal, healthy bacteria into their guts,
They can partially reverse those effects.
wow, the anxiety goes down, the stress response normalizes.
Just by adding bacteria. And this phenomenon has birthed a young but really thrilling field of research called psychobiotics.
Psychobiotics.
Scientists are running early human trials to see if modifying the gut microbiome can influence or treat conditions like depression, anxiety, and stress-related disorders.
The mechanisms are complex, obviously,
Yeah.
but the potential to treat the mind by treating the gut is undeniably there.
It's a whole new frontier.
But, it makes me think, if our physical health, our immune system, and our mental well-being are also intimately tied to this ecosystem, modern life must be throwing it completely out of balance.
Oh, without a doubt, it really is. And this brings us to the hygiene hypothesis, which was first proposed in 1989 by an epidemiologist named David Strachan.
He was looking at the dramatic rise of hay fever.
He was, and he noticed it correlated with smaller household sizes. His core idea, which has obviously evolved a lot since then, is that modern life, cleaner drinking water, antibacterial soaps, smaller families, more cesarean sections, has drastically reduced our early life exposure to microbes.
But why does that matter? I mean, why does a kid actually need to play in the dirt?
Because your immune system is not born perfectly calibrated. It needs training data.
Training data, like a machine learning algorithm.
Exactly like that. When a baby passes through the birth canal, it gets essentially baptized in the mother's microbes.
Right.
Those early gut bacteria interact with the infant's developing T cells, teaching the immune system how to distinguish between harmless everyday substances and genuine dangerous pathogens.
Oh, I see. It's like having a highly advanced security system, but you never uploaded the list of who was allowed in the building.
That's exactly what happens. Without sufficient microbial exposure early in life to train it, the immune system just fails to calibrate.
So it just starts pulling the fire alarm at everything. Dust, pollen, peanuts.
Yes. It overreacts to harmless things, which is driving the modern rise of allergies, asthma, and autoimmune diseases.
And perhaps the biggest disruptor to this delicate immune training, beyond just staying too clean, is our use of antibiotics.
Oh, absolutely. And let's be clear, antibiotics are one of the greatest medical miracles in human history.
They save millions of lives. We aren't denying that.
Not at all. But from an ecological perspective, they are a terrifyingly blunt instrument.
Taking a broad-spectrum antibiotic is literally like carpet bombing a rainforest just to kill one invasive weed.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Sure, the weed dies, but you're left with miles of scorched earth. You wipe out vast swaths of your beneficial bacteria in the process.
And in biology, as we know, empty real estate never stays empty for long.
Never. Scorched earth just invites the most aggressive opportunists to take over.
Right. When you drastically reduce microbial diversity, it can take months or even years for the beneficial species to recover. And in that ecological vacuum, dangerous infections can flourish.
The most notorious of these being Clostridioides difficile, or C. diff.
C. diff is a nightmare. It is a severe, life-threatening gut infection that typically takes hold right after a course of antibiotics.
But how exactly does it manage to survive the antibiotic bomb in the first place when all the good bacteria die?
Well, C. diff is sneaky. It forms these incredibly hardy, dormant endospores.
Endospores, like little biological bunkers.
Exactly. When the antibiotic courses through your system, the active bacteria die off, but the C. diff spores simply boner down and survive in the wreckage.
Wow. And then once the antibiotics clear?
The spores hatch. And because all the beneficial bacteria, their competition, are dead, C. diff has unlimited access to nutrients.
So it multiplies rapidly, completely taking over the empty real estate and releasing toxins that destroy the gut lining.
It's awful. And the cruel irony here is that standard medicine treats it with more antibiotic.
Oh man, so you get trapped in this endless cycle of destroying the ecosystem trying to kill the infection.
Yep, which just gives the infection more empty room to grow back the next time.
Which is why the most dramatic clinical success story in the entire field of microbiome medicine involves C. diff. The cure breaks the cycle entirely.
It really does. It's called fecal microbiota transplantation, or FMT.
Hold on. A fecal transplant. You're saying the medical establishment regulates a procedure where doctors literally take stool from one person and put it into another.
I know it sounds shocking, but it is a highly effective FDA-regulated treatment.
How is that even administered?
It can be administered a few ways. Traditionally, it's done via a colonoscopy, directly applying the donor's healthy microbial community to the walls of the patient's colon.
Oh.
It can also be delivered via a tube through the nose into the stomach. And more recently, scientists have actually developed specialized freeze-dried capsules that survive stomach acid to release the microbes further down the digestive tract.
Literal capsules.
Literal capsules, yeah.
But the goal isn't to deliver a drug. It's to deliver an intact ecosystem, to replant the devastated rainforest so the C. diff has no room to grow.
Exactly. You're restoring the competition. And the data on this is just wild.
I mean, in 2013, there was this landmark randomized clinical trial published in the New England Journal of Medicine.
Led by a researcher named Els van Nood, yeah.
They tested FMT against a standard, very powerful antibiotic called vancomycin for patients with recurrent C. diff.
Right. And the standard antibiotic cured about 31% of the patients.
But FMT cured 94%.
94%. I mean, a disparity like that is almost unheard of in clinical trials.
The results were so overwhelmingly effective that the ethics board actually stepped in and forced them to stop the trial early.
Yeah, they deemed it unethical to keep the control group on standard antibiotics when the transplant was working that miraculously well.
It was a profound proof of concept. Today, FMP is supported by standardized stool banks. It proves definitively that sometimes treating human health means treating the entire ecosystem, not just the human host.
And, for those of us not dealing with a severe infection like C. diff, but just wanting to tend our own inner garden on a daily basis, diet remains the single most powerful lever we have.
Diet dictates which microbes thrive and which starve.
It does. A highly processed, low-fiber Western diet tends to starve the beneficial bacteria, severely reducing your microbial diversity.
But a diet rich in diverse plant fibers does the exact opposite.
Right, and this is where we get the term prebiotics, a concept coined back in 1995 by Glenn Gibson and Marcel Roberfreud.
And prebiotics aren't the bacteria themselves, right?
No, they are the non-digestible fibers that pass through your stomach completely intact.
Serving as the perfect food to nourish the beneficial bacteria that are already living in your gut.
Yeah.
You're quite literally feeding your crew.
You are. It is all about providing the right resources for a resilient community. When you feed them the complex fibers they need, they reward you by producing those short-chain fatty acids we talked about.
Regulating your immune system and sending those vital calming signals straight up the vagus nerve to your brain.
It is a beautiful, quiet symbiosis happening inside you right now.
Tracing this history is just wild. We went from Antony van Leeuwenhoek squinting through a handmade piece of glass in 17th century Holland, totally oblivious to what he was looking at,
to modern genomic sequencing and clinical stool banks.
Yeah, we have finally recognized that we are not solitary creatures navigating the universe alone. The trillions of lives within you are working the night shift, keeping the lights on, keeping the ship flying.
But as with all great frontiers in science, every answer just reveals a deeper mystery.
Right.
Because as we learn to map and care for these trillions of bacteria, we are realizing they might not actually be the top of the food chain in that ecosystem.
Which brings us to a final, slightly provocative thought to leave you with tonight as you drift off.
We have spent our entire time talking about bacteria, but within you, there is also the virome.
The virome, an unimaginable number of viruses.
Specifically bacteriophages that hunt and infect those gut bacteria. And there's the microbiome complex, sprawling communities of fungi.
And both of these realms are barely explored by modern science.
Exactly. It raises this awe-inspiring question. What if the trillions of bacteria we just spent our time discussing are just the middlemen?
Wow. What if your health, your mood, and your very existence are being quietly managed by an even vaster, totally invisible empire of viruses and fungi, just pulling the strings from the deepest shadows of your microbiome?
It's entirely possible.
That is a beautiful, sprawling mystery to ponder. Thank you for taking this journey inward with us tonight on this deep dive. Care for your crew, and we will see you next time on Science After Dark.